Hey everyone, and welcome to the Balanced Bodies Blueprint. I am your host, Vinny Russo.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Eryn Stansfield.
And we're shifting gears from all the conventional fitness narrative you hear on most fitness podcasts, as our main emphasis lies in preventative healthcare, adopting a holistic approach to nutrition, and challenging the traditional views on various fitness topics.
Our mission with this podcast is to provide you with the information you need to achieve optimal health.
And on today's podcast, we're going to be talking about navigating going out to eat with specific goals in mind, mainly like when you're in a diet, things of that nature. And we know that that can be pretty challenging, especially both of us as competitors. We can definitely relate to this, and trying to obtain a quality of life while also obtaining your physique goals. So is it possible to actually be able to go out to eat when on a diet? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So Dr. Eryn, I know you technically like to be introverted and stay in. And when you were competing, were there any specific times that you remember where you're like, man, I wish I could go out, and you chose not to? Or did you ever encounter anything like that, or no?
Yeah, of course. I mean, life happens, right? So I think for me, when I was competing, I tried to avoid it as much as possible. And then without sounding crazy at a restaurant, because you order everything on the side, and you sound like, I don't know if maybe this dates me, but when Harry Met Sally, that movie, it's an oldie but a goodie. When she's at a restaurant, she's quite difficult when she orders, and it kind of reminds me of that. You have to be kind of specific. I think in general, though, even when I wasn't competing, I like to maintain a certain kind of physique. That hasn't been my premise in the past year, but before that, I think even going out to eat, I tried to, one, do it in moderation, and then two, just kind of be more mindful of what I would order, knowing days ahead of time, like which restaurant I was going to go to, and previewing the menu. So
Yeah.
even when I wasn't competing, I think going out was challenging to fit into the diet, as far as diet wise, because you want to maintain a certain look.
Yeah, and it's difficult because when you go out to eat, you could order the healthy stuff, right? But the whole objective of the chef is to make sure that you enjoy the food and to come back. So
Right.
if even, and I know some restaurants, it was more prevalent back in the day where like you could ask for, hey, listen, make sure there's no oil, no butter. And they don't do that, right? Steam my vegetables and it's in butter, right? Because it's going
Yeah.
to taste good. It's going to make you enjoy that food. Their goal is not your health. It's to make sure that you really, really enjoy the food. But there are many precautions that you could take. There are strategies that you can use. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's really going to be when you do have these goals in mind, whether you're on a diet or you just want to optimize your health or transform your physique, you don't have to sacrifice quality of life, right? And we're going to go into the different nuances of how you could actually do that while still being social and not being considered a hermit crab.
All right. So why don't we talk about, first off, for you, Vinny, like what do you do before you go to a restaurant, or how do you plan to go out?
Yeah. So when I'm in a dieting phase, and normally what that means for me is like I'm competing or there's going to be a photo shoot. That's usually my dieting phase. So it goes pretty extreme. So some of the stuff that I do might not be necessary, but it's always to be better to be safe than sorry here. One of the main things that I do is I basically decide, like, understand where we're going, and I make sure that I like look at the menu because I have an idea of
I,
what I want to get
I
going
just
in
want to
there.
interject here because you always decide where we go.
Gotta look at the
It's
menu.
part of it's part well that and it's part of planning, um your routine, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So looking at the menu and getting an idea of what they serve, and then what I can do to the meals that I really want to have to make sure that it's not going to make me go overboard. So the way I like to think of it when I go out and I do have goals in mind is think lowest calorie options possible, right? Because what that's going to do is going to allow you to have it's going to allow you to fit into your daily caloric allowance. And to be honest
So
with you, yeah, it's hard to really go over if you really, really are mindful of of what you're actually putting into your body, and you're trying to go low calorie. I'm not going to say do that every time you go out, but when you do have strict goals in mind, it's a good option to do. Another thing that I love to do, and I do this with my clients all the time now, I really just started to use this term this last year, dating back to, I would say probably last May, because then people started going out and it was summertime and people wanted to go to these restaurants and sit outside. It's gamifying the situation. In your mind, you have to understand, like, yeah, you have goals, right? You could still be mindful, but gamify it. How good can you do? And that's to say, it's not how much, it's not about restriction. It's about, well, look, this is a challenge. Am I going to let the challenge push me off track, or am I actually going to make efforts to try to mitigate the damage as much as possible? So having that mindset going into where it's more of like a game than it is so much a burden or a restriction, and also understanding when you do go and wherever you go, what are they having to offer, right? What are they offering you? Because look, this is it has to be a lifestyle. It can't just be some type of fad diet. So when you get into these strict routines, it's okay for the time being, but emphasizing the importance of trying this out, right? Gamifying the situation, figuring out what really works for you will carry over to a lifestyle, because then you don't have to be so extreme, but you still have a foundation of like a game plan for certain events like holidays, celebrations, weddings, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think the most important part for me was I usually didn't pick the restaurant. Like if a group of friends were going out, usually they would pick, but then I would always look up the menu days beforehand. And
Yeah.
it actually was something that I was looking forward to, right? So I'd been on plan all the week, and that was kind of my meal to splurge a bit, but also being mindful of what the days surrounding that particular day were going to look like for me. And then also making sure I knew exactly what I was going to order before I ever stepped foot in that restaurant. So
Yeah.
that really helped me out. Speaking of celebrations or holidays, how else do you prepare for something like a special occasion, essentially?
So there's two main things. One of the, I like to say, leaving wiggle room. So, by wiggle room, I'm talking about like leaving some extra calories for you in case you decide to go a little bit overboard, right? So, um, there's two ways that I really like to do it. One of the days that I kind of got away from, one of the ways is called bracket days. And it's sort of like what you just said. It's basically like the day before and the day after the event, you are kind of bringing calories down. So over the 3 day period, like you're down in calories, then you're up during the event, and then you're down again. It should even out, right? So you could use bracket days where you bracket them to where you go lower in calories. I think the easiest way to do it, to add wiggle room, is a protein modified fast. So you always want to hit your protein intake per day. So if you do something to where you're doing protein for your meals beforehand with some veggies, you're leaving carbs and you're leaving fats for that event. And basically what you're doing, you're ensuring that you're hitting your protein intake. You might even go a little bit overboard. That's okay. But you're also leaving that wiggle room for those calories during the event, which is mainly going to have some carbs and some fats. So I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. And that's sort of what I utilize when I'm not in competition mode, right? Like I'll just make sure that I'm hitting my protein during the day. And if I'm going out to eat and having a few drinks, I'm still going to try to be as mindful as possible, still enjoy myself. But I understand that there's like, I still have a decent amount of calories to fit into that day because I took carbs and fats out of, not that carbs and fats are bad. So don't get that. It's just easier to play with your calories, especially how calorically dense fats are. And you know, you're going to probably have carbs at the event. So it's just really just playing it safe, than actually being sorry.
What about using something like intermittent fasting to
Yeah. Yeah.
mitigate the so I tend to look at calories as the total caloric intake during the week. Uh, and so could you do intermittent fasting like the day of your event?
Well, there's two issues I see with doing intermittent fasting the day of your event. If you try to hold out and eat a little bit later, number one, you're going to be lacking in protein, and number two, you're probably going to be really hungry going into the event. And that's never a good scenario. If you're going hungry going
Right.
to the event, I mean, imagine going to a wedding and you're starving and you hit that cocktail hour and there's that all there's like you just go in and you don't even care
Yeah.
and you're not even thinking and you're socializing and you're just chowing on
Yeah.
food. So it could be a good strategy, depending on the individual. But I just see trying to hit protein, total protein for the day, and actually going into the event a little bit hungry might be just a little counterintuitive.
Okay. So you refer to mindful eating a lot. Can you talk about that and what that is?
Yeah, so mindful eating involves basically paying attention to all the experiences that you're having with eating, with drinking, being cognizant of everything that you're putting into your body. Um, and that means just basically having a full self awareness, and just really, really understanding what you're doing in the moment at the time. So it's really about tuning into your body.
Can you talk about how that's done? I know a lot of people say listen to your body,
Yeah.
um, but I don't know that that's really listening to your body. It's kind of listening and then modifying, I guess. So tell us a little bit how you would listen to those hunger cues.
Yeah, so that's basically it. Like you're giving your body time to tell you whether it's still hungry or tell you whether it's full. It takes the brain a while to understand whether if you just eaten or not. It takes a while for that to happen. So it's really about slowing down, tuning in, trying to listen to your body, see if you really are hungry. And that involves like recognizing certain physical sensations, like your stomach, right? Is it still growling? Does it feel really distended, before you even feel full? Um, are you lightheaded because you're not eating enough? You restricted too much. You tried the intermittent fasting and it was just wasn't for you. Are you experiencing low energy levels because you are really hungry, or are you lethargic because you're that full, like something after Thanksgiving? So tuning in is just really being able to determine what's going on in your body with how it feels in the moment, and then giving it time to allow your brain to realize what's actually going on.
Yeah, and so I feel like when you've been dieting for a long time, sometimes that's harder to do than other times. So it sounds easy, but it's not necessarily that easy. Um, you talk about slowing down the eating pace a little bit, or
Yeah.
refer to that. Is there any good strategies to do that? Like,
Yeah.
for example, I saw one recently that said if you eat all your vegetables first,
Mhm.
so that kind of satiates you a little bit, so you're not as hungry when you sit down to a meal. I know that this is probably a reward meal or something that somebody's looking forward to, but I assume we could do something like that in this case as well.
Yeah, eating the vegetables, I'm not sure how much it's actually going to slow you down. It might help you with your fullness though, because
Yeah.
of the receptors in your stomach, right? And that kind of just expanding your stomach a little bit. But there are a few techniques that you can use. One of them, which might seem a little annoying, is really just putting down your utensils between each bite. Like take a bite, put it down because it takes time to pick it back up. And then you actually realize, like, oh shit, like I'm eating kind of quick because you have to keep picking it up. So you actually become in tune with that. Taking sips of water in between bites or whenever you can, that will also help fill you up, but it also helps you recognize how fast you're actually going. And then one of my favorites is really just trying to talk to everyone that's at the table, even if it's just you and your partner or it's you with all of your friends, just engage in conversation because it's going to slow you down from eating. The only problem with that is like, then you don't really, you're kind of losing track. So like, don't eat and watch TV. If you're eating and watch TV, your mind's off somewhere else, but you're still capable of eating. If you're talking in conversation, it's hard to put food in your mouth while you're having a conversation. Um, so I feel like that helps a lot too with slowing down the pace, making sure you chew the food. I know it sounds, very very monotonous sitting there just trying to chew, but you actually pay attention to the taste and the texture, and it actually makes the experience a little bit more enjoyable. And then you also allows your brain to catch up with how much you're actually eating. So instead of waiting 10 to 15 minutes after you slam a meal, your body's actually realizing because you're giving it time, your brain's realizing like, oh, I'm eating, like I'm getting more full and more full and more full. So then you won't want those seconds and maybe you won't even want dessert.
Yeah. And I know you'll allude to this later on, but I like to share. So, most people go to a new restaurant and they haven't had a certain entree. So you can have everyone take a little bit, and
Yeah.
then you have less for yourself.
Yeah, that's sort of what we do when we go out. Like if we're going out, at least lately, we notice that we'll split an appetizer and we'll even split an entree, and then we're out of there.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's great.
not that we intend to do that. Like I tend to go there and
Yeah,
get my own entree. It's just like we realize we're not that hungry, so
right.
okay, we'll just split it. We'll get a taste.
Yeah. And let's talk about what you do at the restaurant. How do you order? If you're
Mm.
looking at a menu, what do you order? What do you look at? Um, how
Yeah,
do you
this
how do you
this is good.
proceed?
This will give our listeners a lot of info. So first things first is like talk to your server. Like you mentioned that Harry and Sally thing, um, right? That's the movie you said, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Right.
Clearly,
I
clearly,
didn't
Vinny
haven't
has
seen
not
it.
seen that
I haven't
movie.
done seen it at all. No. Um,
We're gonna
so
watch it.
and me being a bartender and server in the past, like I would really appreciate this when it happened, which was few and far in between. Talk to the server, right? Just let them know because they're going to appreciate it, right? Ask them, like, if you and it's just your partner, like, pull the waiter over to the side, even if it's your friends, like, go there, go figure out who's going to be your waiter, pull them over to the side, and just let them know, hey, look, I don't mean to be difficult. I just have some goals in mind. So you could get my order last, but I might just ask for a lot of stuff to be adjusted if that's okay. And they will truly appreciate it. Um, they're, because the thing is that it's going to take time from them and they have to hop from table to table. So if you let them know, they'll they'll definitely appreciate it. Um, Plus, this gives them an idea of like giving you suggestions, right? Like, oh, well, instead of this, we could do that, right? So they could actually help you out too. But basically, talk to them, talk to your friends, and talk to your partner if you're out to eat. And you could be like, hey, can the bread be held? Like, you could let that be known right off the bat because sitting down to eat and pounding bread, it's pretty addictive. And you just want to keep eating more and more bread, throw some butter on there, but then the calories are coming up. So it's a good way to mitigate how many calories you're actually taking in. And another thing that I've tried in the past, doesn't work that well for me, but it has for other clients, is asking for a to-go box right away. Because this already sets up the idea in your head that you don't really have to finish all your food. I am someone who will finish the food, plain and simple. So it hasn't really worked for me, but I know those that might get a little bit full. I know, Dr. Eryn, you barely ever finish your food, and I'm usually the one who finishes it, so it would work for you. But
Yes,
yeah,
I
those are some things. Yeah.
well, and also chips and salsa, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
try to avoid that. That's like
Try to
so
avoid Mexican
easy.
Tex-Mex restaurants altogether when you're on a diet.
It's so easy to just
Just pick.
continue to eat chips, yeah,
Yeah,
and
just pick and go.
especially if there's guac or salsa. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and I like to have leftovers. It gives me something to look forward to the next day, especially if you are mindful about what you order, so that you can.
You don't know. It sits in the fridge for like 3 weeks. There's no.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll take it for lunch the next day. But like if you're mindful, you can eat it the next day and it's
Yeah.
not you can still
Yeah. Sometimes.
meet your goals.
Yeah, sometimes usually what happens is I go into the fridge and I wind up eating it. Yeah, it's usually what
Correct.
happens.
All right. So we talked about a little
Talk
bit of
setting up the
about
server.
the setting up the server, and
Yeah,
let's talk about appetizers. Like how do you what do you order? What are low calorie options?
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
tell
kind of
us.
how we'll do this. We'll just go through some options for like appetizers and the courses and stuff like that. I love appetizers. When I get there, when I sit down, I want to start picking, plain and simple. So I do love appetizers, and they can be healthy. Like you don't have to go with spinach and artichoke dip or the nachos. You could actually pick healthier options, which number one could be a salad, right? Get the dressing on the side, just order a side salad. That could be an appetizer. One of my favorites is shrimp cocktail. It's very high in protein. It's lower in calories. You don't have to use all the cocktail sauce. You could do dips of it here and there. It's not terrible for you, but if you really want to be mindful, but shrimp cocktail is like my go-to. A vegetable croudier, is that how you say it? Croudier?
I I don't know. I think
Well,
that's a
I
French
think
word.
that's it. Well, hey,
Maybe
I'm not.
crude. I don't know.
Someone will correct us. We'll get a comment
Yes.
on our
Yeah.
podcast. I
Yeah.
love this, especially if the restaurants don't offer it. You could always ask for like a side of, I don't know, celery sticks and carrot sticks. Most restaurants usually have that, but vegetable crudité is really just raw vegetables. And I love this because it's a good way to get some fiber in. It's a good way to start filling you up so you don't overeat during the main course or even at dessert. So I love vegetable crudité. And then the last one would be something like a hummus. And you could get it with a few pitas that don't, you don't have to think that you're doing something wrong with the pitas, but you could always ask for a side of more vegetables or extra veggies or no pita and just all veggies. And they usually give carrot sticks and celery sticks. Out here, they give bell peppers in Utah. So I could appreciate that. But I think that's another great option. So those four are really like some good mindful options that you could choose that will help satisfy your palate and lead you into that main course.
I like for a starter or for an appetizer, oysters, because they're full of protein and well, not full, but per ratio, per amount that you get probably. And they're salty. And if you can get over the texture, I think they're really good. Um, what do you think about like stuffed mushrooms?
I mean, you can just be
Yeah.
mindful of what goes in. I mean, I honestly feel like what they throw into the mushroom and how they saute it, it's not going to really do you any justice by doing that. I love stuffed mushrooms, especially if there's like sausage in it.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't order that as an appetizer going out to eat unless you look at the menu, you're like, wow, like I'd rather waste my calories on the stuffed mushrooms and get like a really, really light main course. Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, and that brings us to our next topic. What do you order for a main course?
Well,
Um,
the main course is what you're going there for, hopefully. But you want to keep it as simple as possible. And the best way to do this is number one, make sure you have protein. Okay. Vegans, vegetarians, I get it. Use your complementary proteins. Try to load up with rice and beans, something like that. It's going to have other calories, carbs, especially for you vegans and vegetarians, but make sure you get a decent amount of protein with that meal. If you aren't a vegan or vegetarian, the protein should be baked, broiled, or grilled. They should not be fried. You could always ask them to leave off the sauce, put it on the side. Don't cook it in oil. You could always say, if it's marinated, if they have an option to where it's not marinated, and just put that on the side as well. Most places that if they have marinated, like especially if it's chicken and it's marinated, it's pre-marinated. So they'll just cook it with the marinator on it already and it's just sitting in the fridge. So just be careful with that too. It's just extra calories that you're trying to be mindful. I would definitely make sure you have carbohydrates with it. Like there's nothing wrong with carbohydrates. Just plan for it. So get your baked or sweet potato, get some rice. If you really, really want to say, I don't want carbs, I don't need them, like I'd rather just focus on like a big slab of steak, then get a nice large side of vegetables. And when you get the vegetables, make sure they're steamed, make sure they're broiled. Some people do a grilled, like grilled asparagus. They just usually load it up with some oil. So it's something to be cognizant about. It's not to avoid. Just understand that there's probably going to be oils on stuff like that. But when it comes to fats, you really don't need it. You really don't need to have extra fats in there because you might be getting it from the protein source. Number two, fats are very calorically dense. So you don't need to have all of that sauce, all that marinade, whatever it is. Even if you're getting a salad and they bring out olive oil, you don't have to have the olive oil on it just because it's just going to add calories. And to be honest with you, it's low volume. It's not going to fill you up. Avocado, you don't need it. It don't even really taste like anything. You should put some salt on it. So stick with your protein, stick with your carbohydrates, stick with some veggies. The fats, you don't need it. If you want it, fine, but you don't need it. Especially with steak,
um,
sorry, especially steak.
yeah,
Like they're gonna throw butter, like they'll bring it with a chunk
yeah,
of butter, or they'll do
that's
like
true.
the blue cheese crust, which I love. Like if I'm having that on a ribeye, I'm saving a ton of calories throughout the day. So
Well, and I usually go, I mean, as far as entrees go, I go with either fish or um or a steak.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful with some of the chicken stuff because sometimes they bread it or they fry it,
Yeah.
and it's not always straightforward, I don't think, unless you specifically ask.
Yeah, and
Um,
fish is a very good option. It really is, especially a white fish, because it will be lower in calories. Salmon, which is great for you, is a little bit higher in calories because there's a decent amount of fat in it. And what restaurants love to do is they'll throw pesto on it. And to make pesto, you need a bunch of olive oil. So be careful with that as well, because pesto is tastes absolutely amazing. I smell pesto and I get chills. I
yeah,
want to eat it. But salmon with pesto, just be careful, right? Just
yeah.
account for
The
it, be cognizant of it.
the best thing to do too is just say, can I get all sauces on the side? So you can still try some of the stuff,
Yep.
but not it's not on top of your food.
Yeah,
So you can enjoy it, but with moderation, right?
exactly. And cheese is another thing. Cheese is not bad for you at all. But it will add those calories. So if you could get stuff without cheese, cool. If you really want the cheese, then just account for it. That's all.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about my favorite dessert.
Desserts. Yeah, you don't really need to avoid desserts. You just need like a sound approach going in because you could go overboard with it because they taste amazing. They're highly palatable, and those calories will add up very quickly, especially after your appetizer and your entree, and now you're having dessert. So two main tips I could give with desserts is number one, sharing the dessert, like Dr. Eryn said earlier. It's the easiest way to make sure that you don't go overboard, especially if you push the plate closer to the partner that's actually doing it. It'll allow them to eat a little bit more and you kind of stay away. The way that I like to tell our clients, is what I like to tell them is you don't need to eat the whole thing. Like you want the taste of it. So take a few bites and see if that satisfies you before you just keep going. Because I know with me, like I always talked about this. I wish there was like a bakery that sold bite-sized things because I just want to
Yeah.
taste. I want to go in and get like a bite of an oatmeal raisin cookie or a bite of, I don't know, a pistachio macaroon, something like that, right? Just a bite. I don't need the whole thing. So you'll realize that after a bite or two, it satisfies your taste for it. So that's usually a good thing to do is always to share it and try just to take a few bites. And then one of my other more extreme ways to go in with dessert is honestly a decaf coffee with whipped cream on the side, right? So the whipped cream on the side is almost like your dessert. It sounds very extreme. I know. It almost sounds like disordered eating. I get it, but we're being cognizant here. So I would get a decaf coffee because normally you're going out to eat later at night, so you don't want to be up. And the whipped cream, you could, by putting it on the side, number one, you're not getting the server putting or whoever's making it put the whipped cream in there for you. So you could basically be the person who determines how much whipped cream goes into the coffee. That's number one. Number two, any extra whipped cream you have on the side, whipped cream's not that high in calories. So you could eat that with a spoon. You want to get a little frisky, ask for some cinnamon and throw some cinnamon on top of it. Yes, it is extreme, but it will satisfy your need for a dessert.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, I would avoid dessert altogether.
Mhm.
And then I think I went through a period of like, all right, if I'm gonna get dessert, then I'm not drinking, or I choose, right? Which also sounds terrible, but it depended what my goal was, right? And so if I wanted to have a certain look, I had to be a little bit more strict about my calorie intake and what I was doing. And speaking of drinking, though, let's talk about um, can you drink? Can you order alcoholic beverages?
So yeah, so this really depends on your goals and your overall quality of life. If you're someone who likes to do it once a week, twice a week, and you need to do it, okay, just once again, there's a mindfulness that has to take play. Um, but when you go out to eat and you're eating off the plan, you don't really want liquid calories. That's the way that I'm looking at it. Like you have your calories come from food, and that includes alcohol because alcohol does have calories. But we'll talk about alcohol in a second. Let's talk about choices to choose for beverages while you're eating, especially out here in Utah. It's not a big state with a bunch of drinking going on. Um, a lot of people go out to eat, and there's like three main things that you can order that will help starve starve off those liquid calories. First thing, Number one, which is the best, is going to be water. Water with a fruit in it, like a lemon or a lime, is perfectly fine. And drinking a lot of it will help you feel satiated. That's the best thing to do. The next, I would say, is probably like a club soda or seltzer water. Same thing. Throw lemon or lime in there. And then the last one is diet soda. All of those are 0 calories. Now, I know there's a lot of debate here with diet soda, but because of the artificial sweetener aspect of it. But trust me, trust us, it's fine to drink diet soda. You'll be fine. You are not going to have, um, 300 times the amount of of Splenda in your system from having a few Diet Cokes. And also, when I have a Diet Coke, it's a treat to me if I'm on a diet. Like I really, really enjoy a Diet Coke. I know we have Diet Coke versus Coke Zero here. Um,
Yeah, I love
Dr.
Coke
Eryn's a Coke
Zero.
Zero. Yeah, she'll drink
Yeah,
that. She'll drink that more than water.
yeah, I will. It's funny when I was competing, I think I told you a story, but I was it was kind of getting down to the last few weeks of one of my competitions. And I had been drinking water the entire time.
Mhm.
And I remember my coach telling me at the time that I could have diet soda, and it was the best thing in my life to have like a diet Coke at the
Yeah.
time. They didn't have Coke Zero at the time, but um I I thought it was just the greatest thing ever. So obviously that got cut later on, but
Yeah.
it was a hell of a lot better than water. So
And once again, listeners, like these are extremes because when you bring your body to stage, there you have to go to extreme measures, especially with restriction and with discipline. And if Diet Coke is seems like a treat, if that seems like it's some disordered eating, you have not brought yourself to stage the way you're supposed to bring yourself to stage.
yeah.
So,
Very true. Yeah, keep
yeah.
that in mind. All right, let's talk about alcohol now.
Yeah, probably what everybody wants to talk about.
Yeah.
Um, First and foremost, make sure you are drinking responsibly because your life does actually matter. So make sure you are doing that. Set yourself a limit, which basically means like before you start drinking, try to give yourself an idea of how much you're going to consume and really, really try to stick to that. That's another form of like building discipline is like, hey, and integrity, to be honest with you, but discipline because you're telling yourself, I'm only going to have 3 drinks. When you hit that third drink and you want more and you stop, that's a form of building discipline. So make sure you limit yourself, pace yourself, which you could drink slowly. You could drink water in between drinks just to make sure that you're going at a slower pace and also to hydrate while you're doing that. And most importantly, do not drink and drive. So if you plan to drink, we have those cool apps, Lyft, Uber, things like that, that could actually save your life and save others' lives. So with that being preferenced into what we're about to talk about, let's go into some beers, some liquors. And once again, this is going to be very calorie cognizant, so to speak, which means we're going to go as low calorie as possible because honestly, these calories are pointless. They're useless for us. Um, so let's talk about beers. Eryn, I know you're not a fan of beer. If anything, you like cider, but cider is
Mhm.
pretty high in calories, so I would not say to do a
And sugar.
cider.
Yes.
Yeah. So my list of approved beers, and let's go from like the lowest to the highest calories. And the lower the calories, the more it's going to taste watered down. And it's supposed to, because there's less alcohol in it. So it's going to be more watered down. The first one's going to be Bud 55, which has 55 calories per beer. Then you go up to MGD 64, which has 64 calories per beer. Then above that's Michelob Ultra Gold, which is 85 calories. Then you have Corona Premier, which is 90 calories. And then you could do something like Michelob Ultra, Amstel Light, or even like a Miller Light, which is 95 to 96 calories per beer. That's all under 100 calories. Honestly, you'd have to drink a ton of Bud Light, Bud 55s or MGD 64s to feel a buzz. But if it's to be social and not really get that buzz, then those would be the way to go because it's very calorie cognizant.
All right. I would just avoid it altogether
Yeah, you're not a
because
beer
I don't like
person.
beer.
I'll tell you what,
No.
I like Allagash White. Like I'm not a big beer person at all. And if I do drink a beer, it's gonna be extremely light. I used to get made fun of all the time. Like, oh, you're a lightweight. You're gonna get hammered off of a 6 pack of Bud 55. Yeah, I will get a buzz off of Bud 55. I don't drink that often. Um, but I will say a Belgian white, I don't even know beers. I don't like hoppiness. I don't like pale ale. I don't like anything. But I know that Belgian whites, every Belgian white I've had so far, I've thoroughly enjoyed. So sorry, I had to get that out there.
What about hard liquor?
Hard liquor, just keep it as simple as possible. Tequila, vodka, whiskey, and gin. They all have around 100 to 110 calories per serving. So it's pick your poison here. And
Yeah.
pun intended too with that.
Yeah.
But the key with them is going to be the mixers, right? So
Yes.
choose a 0 calorie mixer, which helps you keep calories on the lower side.
Mm.
So things like Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi, Coke Zero, Seltzer, Club Soda, Diet Tonic, even coffee. So throwing like tequila and coffee and having like what is that? A Spanish coffee, I think. I don't know. You could do it with water as well. You could water down. I've seen some people do that before. Well, they'll have something in water. But worst case, if you don't want to do the mixers, then just drink it on the rocks or have it neat.
Yeah. I usually avoid like the cool drinks, the ones where the restaurant makes up their themed drinks and the
Yeah.
simple syrups, because
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
pure sugar on top of the calories that you're already getting from the alcohol. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And like I like margaritas because I like tequila, but margaritas
yeah.
are also full of sugar. But I usually tell them like, hey, substitute the simple syrup, like take it out, substitute the margarita mix with, club soda, tequila, give me some oranges, and I'll throw Splenda in there. And that's like a treat to me if I was on a diet plan. Not being on a diet plan, I will have a margarita, spicy margarita. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about my favorite wines.
Wines. Well, now currently your favorite. Now you're a big
Yeah.
you're a big Grey Goose girl, number one. Number two,
Yes.
you really like sugar-free Red Bull. That's your go-to.
Yes. So I feel like in Utah, at most of the bars, they do have sugar-free Red Bull.
Yep.
If you go anywhere outside of Utah, I feel like they do not. And then I'm stuck with putting it in either a Coke Zero or a Diet Coke, which does not taste as good, but I have a hard time doing any kind of shot, so I like to mix it with something.
Yeah.
If I'm doing shots, there's trouble. So
Yeah, we're not doing shots. No one's doing shots. All right,
so
let's talk about wines. Let's go off this shot
yeah.
talk. So wines will be very similar, in 4 to 5 ounces serving, ranging from anywhere like 110 to 140 calories. I remember we had a little talk about like white versus red wine,
Our
and
first conversation, we had a little debate about which one had a lower sugar content, right? A
yeah, yeah,
lower GI index.
and
Which
the person
I
who
was
was
wrong.
the person who
I
was
was
right, you
wrong.
could tell drank, and the person who did it. So,
I
um,
was wrong.
but yeah, so with wines, a Pinot Grigio, 5 ounces of it, 110 to 140 calories. A rosé is usually 120 to 140 calories. A Cabernet is usually 120 to 140 calories. That's all like 5 ounce servings. So you really got to just pick whichever one you like. I honestly say go with a red wine over a white wine. That's just my preference. This is what we debated, and she thought there was more of a sugar in the red compared to the white, and the white's a lot sweeter. So I was like, no, there's more sugar in that, and came out there's just like a little bit more in white. So I like dry reds. I do like a Pinot Noir. I'm the once again, I'm not a wine connoisseur, so I don't even know if that was the right term, dry red for Pinot Noir. But I do. That's our drink of choice. That's our wine. Just I do something a little different. I'll throw diet ginger ale in it with ice. I get scoffed at, but it's pretty good. So you should try it. But
I
we
like
do.
it.
Oh no, you got turned on to that real quick. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was that was my holiday drink.
Yeah.
And that's when we met, like around that holiday season. So she was introduced to it early. Um, but we have an alcohol guide that goes over all this stuff. There's even links on the PDF to like bring you to different websites to show you some different things. So if you want that guide, um, we could either put it in the section in the notes section. I got to look to see if there is a way to do that. If not, then just shoot us a DM or an email, and I'll send that over to you.
Yeah. All right. I think we've covered most of the topics. Is there, I guess there's a couple of notes on here saying like, how do we handle going out like in the social situation, or if like somebody's really pressuring you to eat something at
Yeah.
maybe during a celebration or at the restaurant or drink more, like how do you handle those situations in general?
Yeah, and this is a conversation I have with a lot of our clients because
Mhm.
they get pushback because you
Yeah.
have their friends that are supposed to be supporting them, and instead they're talking shit to them. Oh, you can't
Yeah.
drink that, or like with guys especially. Oh, what are you, a girl? Like you're ordering a
Yeah.
salad? It's like, yo, like I have goals in mind. Like leave me alone. Like
Yeah.
just because you don't have the discipline to do it and to follow through with something doesn't mean you got to talk down to me, right? So what I usually say is make sure first and foremost, if you are going out um, and you plan to be mindful, let your friends know and just preference it. And your friends who support you would be like, yeah, don't worry about it. Like it's cool. Do what you got to do. Other ones who bust your balls, there's honestly probably like a hint of jealousy there. But even with your family, like my mom loves when I eat. Right. So, oh, you could have this. You could have a taste of this. Yeah, I know I can have it. I'm just choosing not to. I don't want to do it. Right. Oh, well, you don't eat ever. Bah. I'm like, I eat more than you. So, like, it's really just communicating. Make sure you communicate with your family and friends. Let them know the situation. Let them know that you have goals, and that's it. It has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you and what you want to achieve for yourself. And as long as you communicate that forward, if you get peer pressured by certain friends, don't ask them out next time you go out. Or if they're going to be there, deny it. Just say you don't want to go. Because honestly, dealing with that shit is it's difficult. And when I first started competing, I dealt with it a lot. And I got in a couple people's faces because I had to. It's like enough's enough, man. Like I get it. Like it was funny at first, but shit's old. Like I have a goal in mind. I'm gonna step on stage. You're not. So leave me alone. Let me do what I got to do. So communication is going to be the biggest thing there, plain and simple.
I was going to ask you, I forgot to ask you earlier, how do you, when you're tracking your calorie intake, and how do you track something like going out, or do you ask people to track?
I don't ask people to track because it's more of a burden. With me, it's more of like it's just understanding. So I've been doing this for a very long time, so I have a very good understanding. Um, but it's really leaving the wiggle room. That's going to be the key. Like go
Yeah.
overboard with leaving the wiggle room. And then when you're there and you're being mindful, you're probably going to be under what your daily allotment is. So it's not so much tracking. You can, people could do that. They could go into MyFitnessPal. They could track what they're going out to eat. If I'm on someone with like who's doing macros, then yeah, you got to
Mhm.
track. Plain and simple. If you're someone who's on vacation, like I kind of really want to be mindful, but I want to enjoy myself, what can I do? One of the options is download something, some type of tracking app, chronometer, eat this much, MyFitnessPal, calorie counter by Fat Secret. Download some of them and just see where you're at. It's not so
Right.
much like being so detailed, it's understanding where you are. And that's a good way because when you see people do that and they realize that before dinner, they're way high in calories, it'll bring them down, right? They'll be like, oh, I can't go so overboard with dinner now. Like, oh shit, I didn't know I was there. So it's a good way to get an idea of where you are and become more aware of what you're actually doing. But going out to eat, yeah, no, I just leave the wiggle room, plain and simple.
Yeah. I think also, back in the day, I used to avoid it completely. And I think you really need to have some kind of balance. Some of these meals are actually good for your long-term diet habits, right?
Oh
Having a
yeah.
little bit of a break mentally can be, or some people see food as a reward, which I think that paradigm needs to shift. But also see the, going out experience, being with your friends, having conversations, being in that restaurant environment. I'm a big restaurant ambiance person. Like
Mm.
I really like the restaurants to be a cool ambiance, because it's not just about the food. It's about who you're having that meal with,
It's the experience.
and where you're having that meal. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a whole thing. So really, shifting that paradigm, it will help you enjoy the moment a little bit better
Yeah.
as
I'm
well.
I'm glad you brought that up because even with potential clients, they're like, "Oh, I have this vacation coming up, or I have these a couple events, coming up this month, so let me start next month." And I'm like, "Whoa." I'm like, we want all of those experiences during our time. Why? Because we figure out what strategy
Right.
works best for you. The more practice you have and you give yourself with these experiences, the better you're going to be able to navigate through them. So if you are on a diet plan, it doesn't mean avoid. It means, once again, gamify it. Like, see what strategy works best for you, because once you find that, you are set. You are able to do that for any event that comes up. And the more practice you have on it, the more you're able to refine it. So if you are
Correct.
on a diet, you don't have to avoid vacations. You don't have to avoid going out to eat. Or if you're planning on joining up with something like Balanced Bodies or another type of nutrition coaching company, you don't have to delay it. Instead, see it as an opportunity. Like, let me learn from these experts on how to navigate these situations. And let me get so much practice that I know how to do it. And whenever they pop up, I'm good. I don't have to question what I'm doing because I know it works for me.
Yeah.
So
And the
yeah,
more you do
brought that
it,
up.
the easier it gets.
Yes.
And it's this isn't about dieting, it's about a lifestyle, like you mentioned earlier. And I think that's so important, because your life, if you're, signed up with a coach or somebody that's helping you with your diet, that doesn't end. It should be a lifestyle. And you need to know how to mitigate certain situations with, and having that balance.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important.
Yeah. And look, you're gonna fuck up. Plain and simple. Like I said, plain and simple 3 times. Did you hear that? Like, what is this? Like my go-to phrase now?
Yeah.
We shouldn't change the name of this episode to plain and simple. Uh, but you're gonna mess up. It's gonna happen, and that's okay. There's not no such thing, but you shouldn't strive for perfection. It should be overall consistency, right? And if that's on average 5 out of 7 days of the week for an entire year, that's you're gonna have so much transformation. You're gonna build so many good habits, and that's consistent. That's not perfect, but you're gonna mess up, and when you do mess up, it's okay. But what you have
Yeah.
to do, lessons can't be learned unless you're aware that you messed up. And when you do mess up, you need to own it. So when you do own it, you have to understand, well, here's, for example, one of our clients just went on vacation. She's had two so far that she's been with us. First one she went on, came back and was about 8 pounds heavier. She says, I hate the way I feel, kid. And I was like, all right, relax. You learned. Well, not really. What did I learn? I'm like, you tell me. What did you do wrong? What do you think you did wrong? Well, I could have did better at this. I'm like, all right, great. You have all this data now. Another, she just had a vacation, came back maybe a pound heavier and absolutely enjoyed herself. And I was like, well, here's the difference. Like, what did you do between that and this? She's like, well, I knew what I did wrong last time or what I could have improved, and I did it this time. And now she has a strategy moving forward for every other vacation that she goes on. She learned. So when you mess up, it's okay. Just make sure you learn from it, right? And then put it behind you and then just move forward. And just make sure that if you do have a goal in mind, that is transforming your physique or optimizing your health, you need to get back on track as soon as possible. No procrastination, no wait until Monday. No, oh, the month's almost over. Let me start on the first of the month. That's all. It's all
Or
scapegoats.
Monday. Monday is
Yeah,
a
the
classic.
Monday of the week.
Let's start
Yeah,
Monday.
yeah. I'm glad you're listening to the conversation because I said that, but I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But yeah, but to stop procrastinating, like get back on track as soon as possible. So yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Plain and simple.
Also, I think don't flip out when you see your scale weight the next day.
Oh yeah,
Just
there's so many.
give
Oh,
yourself some grace.
great. That
Because
was a great point.
everybody sees their scale weight the next day, and it's like, well, you just had a meal that was off plan. So I
Yeah,
just
that
don't
was a
be
great
hard on
point.
yourself.
No, that was a really
Yeah.
good point. Really, really good because there's so many variables that play into that. Like it could have backed you up. You could have just more stuff in your GI tract. You're probably holding water because of the amount of shit that they threw in it, like sodium. So it's
Yeah.
okay. Just give it a couple of
Yeah.
days and then assess.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, listen, we are going to have, we have the PDF for dining out mindfully. We have that on our website. So if you go to www.balancedbodies.io, you could go, it's right up top. If you're on your phone, you'll see it. It's like a little blue link. Click on it, dining out guide, just download it. It is free. And it's pretty much everything that we talked about today. So hopefully that helps you all out. So, on behalf of Balanced Bodies, we just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of the Balanced Bodies Blueprint.
We are committed to bringing valuable content. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment and like it and leave a 5-star review.
On Apple, just go to the show, scroll down to the bottom and rate it there. If you're on Spotify, go to the show's page, click the 3 dots, and you can rate it there as well.
And if you believe in the power of knowledge, share this episode on your social media to try and get the information out there to as many people as possible.
And as you navigate your own path towards better health, remember that Balanced Bodies is forever in your corner. See you all next week.
The podcast content may include discussions of medical topics and health-related information. However, the information provided should not be considered exhaustive or complete, and it should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.